All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Local Formation Commission of Monterey County.
Yes. Commissioner Alejo, Commissioner Gorley, Commissioner Leffel, Commissioner Gunter,
Here.
Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Oglesby, Commissioner Orozco.
Here.
Commissioner Parker. Here. Commissioner Poitras.
Here.
Commissioner Snodgrass. Here. Commissioner Stevens. Here.
All right, he is. He is. Your timing is impeccable because the first item on the list is the swearing in of Mayor Ian Oglesby. Oh, but first we better have a Pledge of Allegiance. Perhaps Mr. Snodgrass would lead us at that. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I better open it for public comments. Anyone out there would like to say anything briefly about any item not on the agenda, please fill out a speaker's card. Does anyone have anything to say before we get started here? Hearing none, I'll bring it back, and now we will swear in Mayor Ian Oglesby. If you'll step up here a second, I'll read this to you. Get the right one. Welcome. Congratulations. Repeat after me. Do you, Ian Oglesby, solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, and you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you are about to enter.
I do.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you,
welcome aboard. Glad to have you, sir. Oh. All right. Moving right along to item 2, we will now administer the oath of office to Commissioner Luis Alejo, Christopher Lopez, and Jane Parker.
Whoa.
Bring it right in. Timing is perfect. Chris, pleasure to meet you. Great to meet you.
I'm getting fingerprinted at the sheriff's.
What'd you do now?
Testing.
Testing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Where'd I win?
You just won a seat up here again. All right. Oh, now we got a microphone. Okay. I'm going to administer the oath of office to all three of you. Do you, Luis Alejo, Christopher Lopez, and Jane Parker, solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you are about to enter?
I do.
All right, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right. Hey.
Welcome. Glad to have you again.
Congratulations.
Pleasure to meet you.
Hey, Chris. Congratulations, too.
Oh, another photo.
You're so sworn in.
Gotta be, all three of us have to shake Pete's hand.
All at the same time? All right, I'm going to do that. Okay, now we're going to do that.
All right. Great. Thank you. All right.
Make it interesting.
Thank you. Now, so we don't get feedback, we'll turn that off. Yeah, for the full. Yeah, we already discussed that. All right. Having dispensed with special business, we will move to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be approved in one motion, and there will be no discussion on individual items unless a commissioner or a member of the public requests a specific item to be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion. Any member of the public like to pull Would the commission like to?
I'd like to
Pull
make a
anything.
motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, approved in second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. New business, item 8, consider status report on Fort Ord Reuse Authority dissolution, LAFCO file number 1806. You're from staff?
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and members of the commission. I would like to turn your attention, please, to agenda item number 8 in the packet. This is a status report, progress report, really, on the dissolution and implementation actions for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Our report will be presented this afternoon by Joe Serrano, our senior analyst. I'd also like to acknowledge in the audience several guests. These are our colleagues from FORA. We have Michael Hulamard, Jonathan Brinkman, Steve Ensley, Sherry Damon. So welcome. And Joe, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kate. Good afternoon, Commissioners. After the closure of the military base back in the early 1990s, lands and responsibilities were transferred over to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Now, with the upcoming closure or dissolution of FORA expected to occur on June 30th of 2020, lands and responsibilities will be transferred once again, this time directly to the land use authorities as shown in this map, as well as any other FORA member agency identified in the transition plan. So today, I'd like to go over 5 slides regarding the dissolution process. We'll go over the transition plan, the follow-up tasks, LAFCO requirements, our next steps, and staff's recommendations. For the transition plan, this was adopted by the FORA board following a 2-vote process and was submitted to LAFCO on December 27th. Afterwards, the transition plan was posted on the LAFCO website, and copies of the plan were sent to all the affected and interested parties for their comments. To date, we have not received any comment letters as of yet. While the transition plan did satisfy the statutory deadline, the FORA board did acknowledge during the adoption process that there were areas of concerns that needed to be addressed in the transition plan, and there were questions that needed to be answered, such as what will be the final capital improvement projects? When will they be completed? And how will they be funded? Will there be a funding mechanism that will be replacing the FORA's existing Community Facilities District revenue stream? If so, how would that look? Out of the 100-plus active contracts identified in the transition plan, which of these will be surviving post-FORA? And finally, what are the administrative tasks that need to be completed before the lights are shut off and FORA is no longer in operation? Which leads to our next slide. FORA staff and its board is currently addressing these issues. Earlier this month, a notice of intent was sent to CalPERS to terminate their obligations and to find out what is their true cost, their true debt regarding CalPERS and their pension liabilities. FORA's admin committee is not only reviewing, but will be providing FORA board recommendations on the capital improvement projects as well as those 100-plus contracts. And FORA earlier this month hired 2 consultants, EPS to conduct a study on the CFD funds, as well as RGS, which will be helping facilitating the negotiations between the proposed successor agencies. In order to keep track of all these efforts, FORA staff is also developing a to-do list, in essence, a schedule indicating what needs to be done this year. And it is our understanding that a revised or more detailed transition plan will be submitted to LAFCO sometime in the fall. Now, LAFCO has a unique but limited role in this dissolution process. This process is outside the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, and so in order for us to conduct a dissolution, we requested and required FORA to submit 3 additional items in addition to the transition plan, including an initial fee deposit of $10,000, which they did submit, an environmental determination, which the FORA board determined that the transition plan is not a project and therefore not subject to CEQA, and finally, a signed indemnification agreement. Now, this agreement is currently pending. In late of 2018, Staff, with the assistance of legal counsel, added new language to the agreement to ensure that this commission is identified and defended during and after the dissolution process, and also there would be sufficient funds in the event that a lawsuit is filed. That revised agreement is currently being reviewed by Forest Legal Counsel, but we do anticipate receiving a signed agreement soon. Which leads to our next steps. Similar to FORA, this commission developed a dissolution process schedule, which was first introduced back in January of last year. That schedule has been updated in August and again in this month to reflect FORA's efforts these last couple of months now. We do anticipate a revised or up-to-date or more detailed transition plan in the fall. Therefore, we believe it is appropriate to take action on the dissolution at that time once we receive the more detailed transition plan. In the meantime, staff will continue to monitor these activities, will continue to participate in the upcoming meetings, and will continue to communicate with FORA, Senator Monty's office, and other stakeholders during the next couple of months until the sunset date of June 30th, 2020. With that, staff recommends that the Commission receive the Executive Officer's report, receive a brief update from the FORA staff, receive any public comments, and finally provide any questions or follow-up discussions by the Commission. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
From the public? All right. Then we'll have a brief update from FORA staff.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sherry Damon on behalf of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. The great news is Joe basically covered most of what I was going to say. Report done. No, just kidding. I thought you'd get a kick out of that. So since 2018, December 2018, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about nomenclature. We are now referring to the plan, the transition plan that was adopted by the FORA board as the 2018 transition plan. It is actually the plan, and until those agreements or revisions are proposed and accepted by the FORA board, that is the plan that FORA is moving forward with at this point in time. So just want to make sure we refer to it always as the 2018 transition plan. We did retain regional governmental services after doing an RFP and not receiving any response. RGS finally accepted to help us, and we have a great husband and wife team, Kendall and Stephen Flint. Their resumes are included in the draft FORA board staff report that will be going to the FORA board in February. So they come with a great deal of experience both in land use planning and in facilitation. So I'm very happy that they are on the facilitation team moving forward. They will also be putting forward a work plan, and they have two levels of work plan. The short-term work plan, January and February, is to get their arms around the FORA program, the background documents. They are scheduling meetings with the member agencies. We expect to see those rolling out in the next 2 weeks or so. And then they also have scheduled meetings or will be scheduling meetings with the ex officio members, Monterey Salinas Transit, TAMSI, the Water District, fire districts, the universities, those entities and other stakeholders who are affected with the transition of FORA. Once that regional entity goes away, there are lots of folks that are affected, and so they will be compiling that list of issues. They are meeting with them independently. There is no FORA staff is with them. That is part of their independence in helping to compile the issues and try to see if we can't get to agreements and helping to facilitate those agreements. Additionally, they are providing work with the administrative committee and meeting with the staff of the member agencies, working through those 100-plus contracts. They are working through trying to figure out what those contracts mean. making sure there's consensus from a staff level of what they mean, so that helps avoid issues as we move forward in the process. So they are two very important people that we'll probably be seeing a lot of, and I would not be surprised if they will not be appearing in the future before this body at some point. They have been introduced to the FORA board and to the administrative committee already. In January, the FORA board did take a couple of steps to start implementing the transition plan. One issue was noted by Mr. Serrano, which is the board adopted the notice of intent to terminate the CalPERS contract. That's an important first step in calculating the liability, et cetera. And the second thing the FORA board did was to approve some financial dollars to economic planning systems to provide fiscal analysis support during the transition process. So another important thing that the FORA board has moved forward with. Authority Council is still reviewing the indemnification agreement. I can tell you the main issue has to do with the new language that was submitted, inserted into the indemnification agreement. That is what FORA can actually agree to, et cetera. So still working with Authority Council on that. You do have in your packet the draft to-do list, and it deals with those big picture issues. Behind every single one of those, that to-do list is not intended to be an exhaustive list. It's intended to make sure that we don't miss some of the big picture things and some of the nuances as we move through the negotiation process of those transition implementing agreements, because those agreements will be driving how the jurisdictions interact with each other and how the transition plan is ultimately implemented. So how you share revenues, how we make sure that certain things are accomplished and addressed. And I think pretty much that completes my brief summary to you.
All right, thank you.
And I'm available for questions.
All right, do we have questions from the commissioners? Yes, Mr. Leo.
I see there's a lot of work going into this effort, but I wanted to ask just an update on the obvious. We're under a short timeline. Here we are going into the month of February. And the first deadline for legislation is at the end of February for at least spot bill language. And then policy committees start moving at the end of March and April. That's when you have to kind of put the substance of your bill in an amended bill so that could start moving through the policy committees. So any updates on conversations with Senator Manning and other Monterey County representatives to see when's that decision going to be made? Because we keep going down this road and make these agreements, and which we know are going to be tough for any jurisdiction to want to embrace. Mm-hmm. And if Senator Manning makes a decision either way, it'd be nice to know. But if it is a possibility to have extension legislation, even in a more narrow format, that would save us a lot of this work that we're going to have to continue to do versus trying to support the legislation. We all know that it has to happen this year if it's going to happen at all, because next year in June 2015, you're in the middle of the legislative cycle for the 2020 session. So if you could give us an update on what have we heard, because time is of the essence here.
So we have heard information from Senator Manning's office. I think at this point a placeholder bill will be submitted. I don't know what the actual language of that placeholder will be, so it does buy the jurisdictions some more time to submit some more technical language for legislation. And the common issue that I've heard from many is extension deals with the financing and how you address financial risk, the contingent liabilities, so property taxes and community facilities district. I'm just going to give you kind of the big picture areas that I think are possibilities for being addressed. But that specific language has not been submitted to Senator Manning's office. Some of the other areas that could be addressed are the clarifying the FORA Act in terms of LAFCO FORA jurisdiction, how the transition plan is implemented. It might not eliminate the need for transition plan implementing agreements, but it might provide a mechanism by which you continue to monitor those and implement those. Survivability of the base reuse plan, how that works post-2020, how the policies in the master resolution, in particular prevailing wage and affordable housing, are continued. That might be something that, as a big picture category, is addressed. And then one of the issues that I heard raised by the FORA board during the transition plan hearings is what I call generically in my draft staff report is post-FORA governance management structure of litigation, habitat, financing. What does that look like in terms of moving forward post-2020? And I don't know that any of that has been ironed out, and it's certainly from FORA's hat, we have not conveyed, other than the general categories, those broad issues and concerns have been raised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you said, a placeholder bill is a spot bill, right? Which is a very, just you file some bill in the topic area, but doesn't have any of the substance in it. It's just to kind of reserve a vehicle in
Right.
case a decision is made later. So I get that,
So there's one other piece of information that I didn't tell you.
Okay.
We have a new FORA board chair who is Commissioner Parker, is Chair Parker at the FORA board. And in February, we appoint and update our legislative committee and our financial committee structures. So those committees are in the process of being convened with the vacancies being filled and designated. I think FORA staff anticipates that any specific legislative language would be run through that legislative committee and then brought up to the FORA board in short order. Certainly, because of the short time frame, we are cognizant of the very short time frame to try to get something concrete to Sacramento.
Yep. Has there been any I guess, well, I just put it out there as a comment, just concern about the governance structure, right? On all the different topics you mentioned, FORA was created to provide that regional cooperation, and despite criticisms, they said anytime you break up responsibilities and you spread them over many jurisdictions, whatever criticism there is now of FORA in terms of cost, it will only be double, if not higher, when every jurisdiction has to hire competent staff with expertise, institutional memory, which is in this particular FORA's particular case, it's hard for somebody to come in and walk in and be able to catch up to speed by reading a few pages. It's a very complex area of law, and so I guess those are discussions still to be had in terms of Senator Monty's office. So I look forward to seeing where this goes, because it has to happen soon. And I just want all of us to be apprised of that. And I know the full county board of supervisors already took a position on where they hope FORA goes. But I hope we can convince Monty to. I could literally pull his fact sheet from 5 years ago, and if I read it today, all the same things that existed 5 years ago could be said exactly the same today, if not even for more of a reason, after we've fleshed out all these different challenges that we're analyzing that makes this make a transition plan tougher in reality than it was on a legislative bill the last time. So thank you for allowing me on the update.
All right, any other questions? All right, I have one. Section 2.1.1 indicates a Section 15 trust has been established and funded with $5.7 million for an anticipated pension liabilities. Section 2.1.2 has funded a reserve account in the amount of $1 million to be utilized for retirement purposes. Section 2.2.1 estimates PERS liability as ranging from $7.7 to $9.3 million, which it would seem exceeds the value available assets by somewhere between 1 and 2.6 million. This section includes language, quote, if there is a shortfall, close quote. My concern is that the language seems vague as to how the additional funds will be acquired and who or what entities will ultimately be responsible for payment. for payment. Since a shortfall already seems to exist, how does FORA plan to address this?
I am going to just write a check. Just kidding. It was originally anticipated that CalPERS allows you to negotiate a payment plan for any shortfall. Under the Health and Safety Code, it's my understanding, and it's not like many things at FORA, the law is there two people can have equally different opinions about what the law means. But the way we've interpreted it is that the property tax increment, which is allowed and passed through to FORA now, would continue to pass through to FORA to pay FORA's debt liabilities. Any shortfall of CalPERS on the CalPERS contract, which FORA is under contract to fulfill, would be met by those post-FORA generated property tax increment dollars. That is, I think, what was originally contemplated. But that being said, FORA has other funds in its coffers right now, depending on what the actual actuarial analysis reveals. So the range that's in the transition plan, the 2018 transition plan, is a draft range, and the board took the first step in getting the actuarial number, the final number that CalPERS believes is the actual liability. And until we have that actual liability, that range is just a range. So
yeah, I understand it's a range. Do we have any idea when
yes.
or how long it will take before you'll know the actual numbers?
Well, in theory, we know. Like I was saying earlier, for every single action on here, there are about 35 things that administratively have to happen. So the FORA board took the first step in January at doing the resolution. We already sent that to CalPERS to start the process. They need to send us some information back on notification. There's some new notification rules that FORA will have to notify all its present and past employees who are also members. That hasn't actually happened yet. This is probably the first one that CalPERS has done, and the first, like many things at FORA, we're on the cutting edge of it. We also have started the process with that notice, that resolution. The actuarial timeline begins. It's no longer than 1 year. And we have been told by CalPERS staff that it's a 6-month process to do the actuarial analysis that is required. So in 6 months, the idea is that by our next budget cycle, in June of 2019 or July of 2019, somewhere in that close time frame, we will have a more specific, concrete number to work with. And that's what we actually need as the next step to implement the transition plan, is you need that concrete step. And then the FORA board will have to take some additional steps to actually terminate the contract, which goes to Commissioner Alejo's question, or begs the question, if you end up with some kind of legislation that extends the FORA organization in maybe a more limited form, and you want to retain some of the staff, will you be able to retain some of the staff where you don't have a CalPERS contract in play, where they are used to a certain level of a contract? So there's some issues related to that, but I think the FORA board has maintained the flexibility to address that in the budgeting cycle, and under the transition plan, we've tried to build in some flexibility to be able to modify based on what the factual numbers. You don't always know what you don't know, and we're starting that process of getting the details, because now the devil's in the details. That's one of the first details. Mm-hmm. So there is a plan for how to move forward if there's a shortfall. There's some cash on hand that the FORA board and during the budget cycle might decide to allocate to the numbers once we have that number. Or you also have the option of meeting with the county and continuing to pay from the county. Because right now the property tax increment on the FORA program is a minimum of $2 million a year on just the existing development that's out there. Mm-hmm. So, if you look at a 5-year payment post June 30th, 2020, and I'm not saying we would need that much time, you would have up to arguably $10 million, more than enough to cover $1 million or $2 million shortfall. You've got some room to be able to deal with that.
All right, so you do anticipate there will be a shortfall?
Perhaps, but I think the FORA board has some choices in how it wishes to address the shortfall. It may choose to address it from funds that it has in its on-hand funds now, or it might choose to move forward with something else. And we would have to be working with the county auditor controller on that.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. One more question. Litigation reserve funds, $300,000 seems a bit underfunded. Now, I understand there's some discussion underway to increase that number, but it certainly doesn't seem sufficient to cover whatever potential litigation may be over the horizon as all this unfolds.
Well, I think there are a couple of different issues related to the litigation reserve fund. That's certainly something the FORA board is on the list of concerns that were raised during the FORA board hearings. But that being said, the FORA board took an action to adopt a 2018 transition plan. That plan from FORA's hat is final until such time as it's modified or the concerns that were raised are addressed. So it's really important to keep that position because a final action is reviewable on the CEQA side of things for 6 months because we determined it was not a project that was subject to CEQA. So the litigation timeframe is 6 months from that final action. So the more that folks refer to that 2018 transition plan as a draft plan, not a final plan, it's going to be changed, it's not final, the longer your litigation time period is. So, we are from FORA's hat trying to keep that first litigation on the plan at 6 months to draw any environmental challenges to the FORA action. As to LAFCO's action, depending on what LAFCO does with the transition plan, it could be a different issue. If you're just accepting the plan, are you approving the plan? Exactly what kind of discretion are you exercising with respect to the plan, and what level of environmental review are you relying on? That's kind of a different issue, and that may open up a different statute of limitations issue on the CEQA side of things. With respect to the agreements, so there's lots of different litigation timelines here. And the more we diffuse now, the less, hopefully, we will have to deal with later. But I think the current thinking is to maintain a contingency risk fund that would be funded from either property tax revenues or from FORA funds on hand now into a contingent risk fund so that you would have access to funds to address issues as they arise post-2020.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Well, all right, hearing none from the public, I know we have, I don't know, a statement or a question, but Sid Williams wanted to say something.
Good afternoon. I am he. I see a lot of friendly faces up there who've listened to me for a long time, and some people I've never had the opportunity to meet. By way of introduction, I am the current chairperson of the County Military and Veterans Affairs Commission. I am not speaking for that commission, but that's how I get my finger on the pulse of what concerns the veterans community in the county. And the dissolution of FORA is a large concern to the veterans in the county. There are lots of things happen out on Fort Ord that concern the veterans, the new clinic that's out there, the use of previous Fort Ord golf facilities, lots of other things. The DLI is shedding some of its properties. Those things all concern us. But the real issue and the complex issue for the veterans is the cemetery. I don't know how much most of you know about the cemetery, but it is an 11-phase, probably 50-year building process. It will not be done when FORA is gone, whether it's this next summer or whether it's 20 years from now. we have finished one phase. We are in the process of planning the second phase of those 11. The remaining 9 phases, all of the land that will become that, sits in their pot. And somebody will have to make the decision of how that gets transferred to the state of California for the future use of the cemetery. There is an agreement amongst the county, the city of Seaside, the Veterans Cemetery Foundation, and FORA, which describes how some of that land will be transferred. It describes how funds that may be received by the sale of that land will be dispersed. And FORA has been, because they are, at this point in time, the entity that would make that transfer and allow those funds to go to and from who they are supposed to go to, watches over that. So who will do that in the future once FORA is gone? The lands are not just in the city of Seaside, they're not just in the county, they're not even completely cleaned by ESCA, the process that the BRAC Commission is doing. It is a very complex issue that has a long time frame, and long after I'm dead, they'll still be working on it. So I ask you, as you consider this transition plan, and as your staff works with forest staff to make it smoother, make it better, that we not forget that this is a very, very important issue to a good percentage of the population of Monterey County. And I hope you will work diligently with FORA and their staff as this proceeds to make sure that's taken care of efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Williams? All right. Anybody else in the public want to make any statements about this? Seeing none, you don't have to take action on this, just accept it. All right. Thank you for your time, everyone. We'll move along then to consider appointments to LAFCO's Budget and Finance Committee. You have all seen the sheet that I included in the packet, so you know who my recommendations are. I don't think I need to enumerate them. Do I hear a motion to accept? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We have a new Finance Committee. Thank you all. Executive Officers Report. Kate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission, we have a couple of important personnel matters to inform you of. First, we're very pleased to announce that our senior analyst, Aaron McBain, has been promoted to principal analyst this month based on his extensive knowledge and experience and skills and responsibilities. So we also have in our memorandum here an important note about our senior analyst, Joe Serrano. And it's with mixed emotions that I'm informing you that he has accepted an excellent promotional opportunity in Santa Cruz as the LAFCO executive officer. And so that's an amazing opportunity for Joe. And so we will miss him, but we are also very happy for him. And perhaps, Joe, you might want to make some comments.
It is a bittersweet situation. It has been my personal goal to become an executive officer. Looking back at my LAFCO career, I started in 2008 as a student intern, not knowing exactly what LAFCO was about, but that I wanted to be part of local government. That stems from my childhood of running around saying I wanted to be the first Hispanic president of the United States. Fast forward now, I'll be the first Hispanic executive officer for Santa Cruz LAFCO. So I'm getting somewhere. But looking back at the 10, 11 time frame, I've had the privilege to work with legendary executive officers around the state. and your executive officer, Kate McKenna, is one of those legendary EOs. So I've been honored to work under her leadership, working with this staff and this commission. I'm very humble, and I appreciate the opportunity of working for you as the senior analyst. So again, it's a bittersweet situation, but this opportunity is just a testament of the leadership you provided me during the past year and a half. So I really appreciate it, and I'd like to thank you.
Well, thank you. Santa Cruz's gain is our loss. We'll miss you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner comments? Seeing none, we'll move to closed session. We'll conduct a review of Public Employee Annual Performance Appraisal Program. We'll be back with a report after that.
Honorable Chair, members of the Commission, there will not be a report out of closed.
I stand corrected. There will not be a report when we're done.